Thank you, Mr. President, honored guests, members of the Board of Governors, members of the faculty, staff, students, alumni, graduates, and most importantly, your families, your friends who have come here to honor you. Ani, Sego, Segoli, Skanagoa, Bojo, bonjour, good morning. Wamimi Dijnakas, Wikwem Kong, Manitou Nising Donjaba. I'm truly honored to join you as we gather here today in the traditional territory of the original Indigenous inhabitants of this land on this very, very important day. I was quite shocked to be given this honor, actually, because I'm not really a very good educational role model. In fact, I think there was a time when I thought a thesaurus was a type of dinosaur. Although I've tried very hard to forget my early years of schooling, my mother, if she was here, would be very happy to tell you the story about the time we got to meet the truant officer. But seriously, who knew such a person still existed? Well, apparently, after you miss approximately 3 months of school, she actually comes to your house for a personal visit. This was in grade 5. Certainly, my 10-year-old self did not realize that she came. So you see, every morning, my mom would get me out the door, take me to the bus stop at the corner, and because she had to work, she went off down the road this way to head to her job and trusted that I would stand there until the bus came. Well, that was the first mistake. The minute she went around the corner, I used to turn around and go back inside and spend my day eating Premium Plus crackers with peanut butter and watching Scooby-Doo. I didn't think anyone would miss me, but I should have known better because I went to a school that was so small that when I started, there were only 2 other kids in my grade. Interestingly, both were named Brad Leeson. Apparently, this wasn't just a one-horse town. It must have been kind of obvious that a full third of the class was missing. But it's hard to imagine how a girl with such inauspicious beginnings was even accepted into university eventually, much less became the first Aboriginal Trudeau Scholar, president of the Ontario Native Women's Association, and then president of the Native Women's Association of Canada. Had the opportunity to sit speaking about human rights at the United Nations, sitting across from the Canadian government at a tribunal on human rights at the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. Apparently, my subconscious is still struggling to assimilate the change, as I still have nights when I dream that I am in high school and it's exam day, but I haven't been to class all term. And for those of you who still have that same dream, or worse, the one where you've come to class and you forgot to put your pants on, just to let you know, these dreams don't magically disappear after convocation. In fact, I'm not sure when or if they ever do go away. I'll let you know if it happens. But people ask how I came to be in this position. And I have to answer truthfully that I'm not really sure. Like most of us, I blame my mother. She called me up one weekend and invited me to go with her to Sault Ste. Marie. She said, your aunties are gonna be there, your grandma's gonna be there. I thought it would be fun, maybe we'd get to go to the casino, but it was a Native Women's Association meeting. And when I got there, she said, all the youth are meeting down the hall, you have to go down there. And when I came back out of that room, I was on the youth council, and it snowballed from there. But my life wasn't the only one that was deeply impacted by the actions of my mother. In fact, entire generations of Indigenous people, the lives of tens of thousands of Indigenous women and their children were changed because of my mother. And you thought you had performance pressure from your parents. In 1970, under Section 12(1)B of the Indian Act, she lost her Indian status because she married a non-Indian. So she lost her land, her home, even the right to go back to her own community. But she knew this was discrimination because the same thing didn't happen to Indian men. If they married a non-Indian woman, she became status. And so because this was the 70s, they knew this was discrimination and they knew they had to stand up. She engaged in a legal battle against the government of Canada, eventually going all the way to the Supreme Court. So growing up in our house, we had bake sales and raffles to fund our trips to Ottawa to go to the court case. And on rainy days, we made protest signs and banners. And it wasn't until I was in high school that I realized not everybody's family did protests on the weekend. And when they had bake sales, it was for the hockey team. Sadly, at the Supreme Court, she lost on a technicality. But eventually the case was taken to the United Nations and the Canadian government was shamed into changing and reinstating tens of thousands of women and their children, those women who had been forced from their communities. And you might at this point be asking yourself why I'm telling you this. And it's not because I think my mom is amazing and I like to brag about her. even though she is, and I do. I tell you this because it's an example of how one person, one rather small person, in fact, she's not even 5 feet tall, can make a difference. You can fight the system, and you can and you should stand up against injustice. She was not a federal minister, she was not a member of Senate or a rich philanthropist. She was just a regular young woman, a school teacher from Okemukong, from a northern Indian reserve, but she ended up changing history. And so together, when you leave here, we are going to be molding the next generation of human rights defenders. And recently, when I was heading to the UN, after walking well past, everybody's doing 10,000 steps lately to get her goal on the Fitbit. I got one of those from my husband for Christmas. And we'd gone way past 10,000 steps, and my 3 daughters were with us, and they were starting to complain how much their feet hurt as we were walking down to the UN. And my mother, who is now almost 80, seizes the opportunity to explain how long it took for women to see justice and the importance of remaining positive even when things are tough. So my youngest looks up and says, "Yes, Grandma, I'm positive my feet really hurt." Obviously, we still have a lot to work to do. And so now, so do you. Like Captain Gown superheroes, you now have the power to change the world, each and every one of you. Along with your parents, grandparents, and friends, I am here to honor you, to acknowledge your achievement, and to wish you all the best as you embark on the greatest adventure and the most challenging chapter of your life. And no, I don't mean moving back into your parents' house, although that might happen and would be a challenge. You are the generation that will be tasked with bringing about reconciliation in this nation. And this is our question. How do we achieve reconciliation when there was no conciliation in the first place? This means we cannot simply repair a tear in the wampum belt, go back and sew things together. We cannot go back and change history. But rather to you falls the long overdue task of weaving anew the fabric of a country that incorporates the fibers of all of our being, whether we've come from a country far away where we were escaping violence, or whether we've been here since time immemorial. Together, we will forge a new way forward because we can and we must do better. Reconciliation is only half of the story. We must have truth. We must remember that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission started with truth, because only then can we move forward. But when we've shined a light on that ugly history, on that oppression, on the abuse and the violence, we cannot become paralyzed in our sadness. We cannot feel shamed or guilt. We do not own the sins of our forefathers or foremothers. And I'll tell you, my dad was a biker, so I'm definitely not owning anything he did. What you need to own is what you do now, what you do with that privilege, with that knowledge and power. Because don't fool yourself, whether you came from poverty, a single-parent family, or a distant country, or whether you came from a quiet home on a fancy street, you are now privileged. You have something phenomenal. You're privileged because of what you have achieved, and it was through hard work. And now you have the power and the privilege, so consequently you have the ability to go out and celebrate in wild style, or even just go sit home and relax because you have deserved it. But then maybe next week or next month, you need to get out there and start your journey. Pick your issue, your cause, your belief, and figure out how you are going to make the difference. I won't lie, it's not easy. There are days when I want to stay in bed, pull the covers back over my head, where we don't have to face the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Days I want to go crawl under a rock where the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women isn't on the radar. I'd probably have to elbow Stephen Harper out of the way to get under that rock. But we can't let that happen. And there was a day when I was at the United Nations having one of those moments where I decided it's too hard. I'm not making any progress. Why bother? And this woman from South America came up. And she said, "I don't understand why you're struggling so much. You have that spirit of a hummingbird." And I thought she was making fun of me because I'm really short and kind of feisty. And she says, "No, you don't understand. There's a long tradition. There's a story among her people about the hummingbird in a time long ago when the forests were raging in fire. And all of the animals had run away. And the ones that were left that couldn't get away were standing there looking at this fire as the forests were being ravaged. They're all arguing about what the other ones should do, that the eagle should swoop in with its wings and try to put out the fire. And while they're doing this, they notice there's this tiny little hummingbird, and he's flying back and forth to the river and then back over the fire in one drop of water. He's scooping up one tiny drop of water from the river, going back and dropping it in the fire. And all the animals started laughing at him and saying, "Hummingbird, what do you think you're doing? You can't make a difference." And without missing a beat, with his little burned wings, that hummingbird said, "I'm doing the best that I can." And that's the difference. Because one drop of water might seem insignificant. It's just one tear you wipe away you don't think about. But water has the power to wear away the strongest of rock. And while one drop of water might be insignificant, together thousands and millions of drops becomes a tidal wave that can reshape the entire landscape. And that's what we need to remember. So this is your challenge now. You find your cause, you figure out how you're going to change the world, and you have the courage to stand up for what you believe in and be a hummingbird, because one drop at a time, you will change the world. Chimigwech, thank you.